A widgeon from central Siberia or a tufted duck from Lake Baikal to the north of Mongolia would probably consider this watery wilderness one of the most important places in the world. It doesn't look very exciting by international travel standards. It lies on the Cambridgeshire-Norfolk border. 300 years ago, these fens were an inland sea stretching all the way from King's Lynn to Cambridge. They were home to thousands of wildfowl. A few people here lived on islands in the marsh, like the Isle of Ely. Then, in the early 1600s, the Dutch drainage engineer Cornelius Vermuyden built sluices and two parallel artificial rivers that drained part of the fenland, except for one narrow strip between high banks called Welney Wash. Today, this wash contains treasures richer than any King John is supposed to have lost in these parts. Vermuyden's scheme was classically simple. The two artificial rivers ran straight across the heart of the old fenland for 33 kilometers. Normally, water brought by the Ouse from the East Midlands flows down the right-hand or New Bedford River. But in times of flood, a sluice, opened at Erith, allows the excess water into the left-hand or Old Bedford River. When the water can't escape fast enough, it breaks out of the Old Bedford and floods the narrow strip of grassland in between, the Ouse or Welney washes. In summer, the washes certainly don't look like one of the most vital wetland areas in Europe. In the early 70s, the shepherd, rounding up cattle which fatten on the rich grazing between the rivers, found a rather unconventional mode of transport. A cross-country scrambler motorbike was the fastest way to get around. Josh Scott, the shepherd, a fenman born and bred, was also the full-time warden for the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust Refuge at Welney. He saw some of the changes caused by early summer flooding, which occurred many times during the late 70s and through the 80s. A bridge spanning the New Bedford River leads to an observatory overlooking a man-made lagoon. In high summer, it's hard to see why the Trust should spend all this money on Welney. At first glance, the washes look empty of life, just sedges, grasses and water. Yet it is precisely this combination which attracts some of the rarest breeding birds in Britain. black-tailed godwits had not bred in Britain for 100 years. Drainage and disturbance drove them away. In the 50s, they started nesting in the washes, and between 50 and 60 nested here by 1970. However, their nests on the ground were particularly vulnerable to the early summer floods, and year after year they were flooded out. Today, only a handful of local pairs survive to nest here. Ruffs, which also nest on the ground and had only a small local population to draw on, suffered the same fate. Although a few bred here in the 70s, and they were often seen in breeding plumage in Britain, they have not bred on the Ouse washes again since 1982. Other species have been more successful. Redshank have a reasonably large breeding population, and their numbers would recover the year after a flood. Now, about 70 pairs nest here. This one is performing his courtship display. The edges of the cross dikes are ideal feeding places for snipe. The most characteristic sound in spring and summer at Welmy is the drumming of snipe. They create the noise in flight by extending two stiff tail feathers that vibrate as they dive. Aerial drumming is part of the male's courtship display and a way of claiming his territory. Far less often seen is the courtship ceremony on the ground, a stiff raising of the tail and solemn parade among the rough grasses and sedges at the edge of a dike. About 50 pairs of snipe currently nest at Welmy Wash. But Josh Scott found something else, a very exciting discovery, the nest of a black tern. Like the godwit and ruff, it hadn't bred in Britain for over a century, and there, miraculously, was a nest with 3 eggs. But the big question was, would they hatch? The weeks passed, and the black-tailed godwits hatch out their young. The next problem is to stop them getting lost in the tall grass. One parent flies above, calling repeatedly to keep them together. If anyone approaches too closely, the hen bird takes off to try to scare away the intruder. It's the warden. The strange-looking rake he was carrying was for self-defense, but not against the godwit. A short-eared owl has nested in the grass alongside a bank. At nesting time, they are fiercely protective in defense of their eggs or young. Eventually, Josh was able to see Welney's greatest rarity, the black tern, successfully hatch out 2 young ones. They have not bred here again since 1970. Man can set up a sanctuary and protect it, but the vagaries of weather and flooding are beyond our control. The washes drowse in the midsummer sun. Thistledown entices the goldfinches to feed on ripe seed heads. The dikes are at their lowest level now. A dragline dredges out the silt, ready to receive the winter floods. Only a few short weeks, a Welney Wash will be a wilderness of water, alive with waterfowl.
No, how am I going to sort this lot out?
Don't worry, Mr. Jones.
All these other insurance companies.
We'll do all that.
I'll have to take a day off going around garages getting estimates.
No, leave that to us.
But we still have to get it picked up.
No, we'll get it picked up. No problem.
When do we have to come and get it?
Don't worry. We'll deliver it back for you. I wonder if it'll be cleaned inside and out and looking like new.
Well, it certainly looks good.
It's better than that, Mr. Jones. All the work is covered by a 3-year guarantee.
For easy, low-cost motor insurance.
Better talk direct. To Direct Line.
How much can you save on BT calls with friends and family in Premier Line?
Up to 25%. Off your calls is quite a dent.
How do you find out more?
Pick up the phone and look alive. Call 0800 055 555.
The winter floods have come. Before the Dutchmen drained the fens 300 years ago, all this water rushing down the ooze from the Midlands would have spread out to form an inland sea. Nowadays, when Vermuyden's drainage rivers can no longer carry it all away, the surplus is allowed to rush out to flood the land in between them. A road crosses the washes near Welney village. Heavy floods often close it. At times like this, many smaller mammals are displaced from their usual haunts. Soon, not even the biggest trucks will be able to get through. A few coypu survived here in the 70s. They are aquatic rodents from South America, introduced to Britain by fur farmers. Some escaped and colonized the wetlands of East Anglia. They became a serious pest because they undermine riverbanks and eat the cover used by nesting birds. However, the coypu was eradicated here in the mid-1980s. The floods produce Welney's winter splendour. The wildfowl constantly draw naturalists and bird watchers back year after year. Shovelers with the males in their bright plumage. Many hundreds of these ducks come to the washes each winter. Shovelers have enormous beaks designed to feed on the surface of ponds or lakes. Only rarely do they dive for food. Instead, they paddle quickly through the shallows, picking up tiny plants and animals and sieving out the water. Tufted ducks. The drake's plumage is a striking black and white. When the floods are deep, hundreds of these little diving ducks come to feed on the washes. The flooded grassland of Welney periodically attracts the largest concentration of one of the most elegant of British ducks, the pintail. As many as 1,900. This is a drake. In some years, 4.5% of the entire European pintail population winter at Welney. Teal, the smallest and most aerobatic of all ducks. Most winters there are many thousands of them. The drake, as usual, has far more striking plumage than the female or duck. They look for water weeds and seeds washed out of the grasses in the shallows. This handsome drake is one of 6,000 mallard found on the washes in winter. It's probably flown here from Holland or Scandinavia. But for the wildfowl enthusiast, probably nothing can quite equal Welney's widgeon. They've come from beyond the Ural Mountains, from Germany, from the Baltic, from Scandinavia, and from Iceland. Flocks that build up all winter to an incredible 35,000 birds. It's hardly surprising that a sanctuary was created in this wonderful place. It's the short, sweet grasses grazed by cattle in summer that draw them here in such huge numbers. Widgeon are grazing ducks, and it took time to discover how to make the grass more attractive to them and which grasses they particularly like to eat. Research like this is part of the work the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust carries out at Welney. Evidently, the grass in front of the observatory window is very much to the widgeon's liking. A lagoon was excavated in front of the observatory for a very special purpose. It's intended for what some regard as Welney's most important visitors. The floodlight is on so that they can be seen at night. One day in November, they arrive like snow in the night, flying in from Northern Europe and Russia. Wild Buick swans. Buicks are highly vocal birds with a beautiful, clear, bugling call. They return here each winter from Siberia, bringing their young with them. They're the slightly darker birds. They're quite quarrelsome, chasing rival families away with sharp jabs of the bill. This adult has got oil on his plumage during its long flight from Russia. He'll survive, but heavily oiled birds sometimes cannot be caught until they are too sick to survive. By then, they may have already ingested a lethal dose of oil. Buicks, named after Thomas Buick, the 18th century naturalist and engraver, aren't the only wild swans at Welney. There are a number of hoopers too. They're quite a bit larger. Apart from size, the best way to tell the difference is by the yellow markings on their beaks. With the hooper swan, the yellow patch comes down to a sharp point at the edge of the bill. With Buicks, the yellow patch is smaller and more rounded. Every single swan has different face markings, as distinctive as fingerprints. In 1970, there were 46 hooper swans on the Ouse washes. Today, they number in excess of 1,200, while the Buicks regularly peak at over 4,500. Now, each year when they return in November, it is possible to identify which birds are coming back with a new family, which ones have obtained new mates, and which ones fail to return. Wetlands are becoming an increasingly rare habitat. Even unpredictable natural events like flooding can affect the breeding success of resident and migratory birds. The good news is that in 1970, the Wildlife and Wetland Trust Nature Reserve at Welney covered 120 hectares. Today, it's over 3 times the size and attracts over 30,000 human visitors a year. We can be reasonably certain that the Washes will continue to keep their greatest treasure, a wealth of wildfowl.
In the city, it's